Hello, and welcome to this episode of AdminChat. Today, we're going to talk about forms, flows, and SharePoint List, automating your workflow. My name is Vonetta Watson. I am the owner and operator of Tech Gym Educational Technologies located in the U.S. I'm a Microsoft certified trainer, a Microsoft 365 champion, and a Microsoft educator. I am a lover of anything that is automated. So let's talk about forms first. This is where you can create simple or complex feedback, surveys, polls, or quizzes. We're going to talk about how we can take those forms and add Power Automation to them. It used to be called Flow. We're going to start an automation with a click of a button. Basically, we're going to use a template and we're going to automate our manual task. We're going to step into SharePoint, look at our SharePoint list. This means we can create an existing form to match a list or create a form and match that list. All right, so here we are. We are currently already signed into our Microsoft 365 ecosystem. And so here you can see all of my apps. Remember, I said earlier, we're going to talk about forms, Power Automate, formerly known as Flow. So if I call it Flow, please charge that to my head, not to my heart. It is still a flow to me. And then, of course, SharePoint, we're going to look at those SharePoint lists. So let's kind of set our scenario up. And so I'm going to step into SharePoint just so we can kind of get an understanding of what we want to accomplish today. So we have created an HR team site. This is for our HR team. And so we're going to kind of step into our public group. And so as we step in, we see that we have it already built. Let's step into our HR team documents. So we've currently loaded all of our documents that we're currently working with, but the one that we kind of want to focus on is the PTO request instructions and procedures. Along with this, not only do we want them to have access to this particular information, but we also want to create a form that they can fill out. So that's what we're going to attempt today. Not only do we want them to fill out the form, we also want to have those results actually come to us in our SharePoint site. There are multiple users across many divisions that come into the HR team site. So we want to create a workflow where they can kind of view it wherever they want to. Of course, when we create the form can be viewed right then with the results. However, there are a couple of other steps that we want to add to this. And so that's what we're going to do. So we're going to come out of our SharePoint, but wanted to show you that. Also, this particular HR team site also resides in Teams. So when we created the actual site for our HR team, we also put it in Teams. This is awesome for us at this particular point because as of September 4th, new alert, SharePoint lists are now in Teams. So you can create those lists to manage your work, track your inventory. In this case, we're going to track time off. And then you can add a list to a channel by adding a tab, then select the list that you're looking for. So this is great. It's going to work for our advantage. So when we're inside of Teams, we can view in Teams. But if someone is currently in SharePoint, they can view there as well. But if they want to step into Forms, they can view it there as well. So we want to work with everyone's workflow. And that's the reason why we're taking this particular method. So we're going to come out of our SharePoint and we're going to move right into Forms. All right. So automatically it's going to sign us in. And here we go. So we're going to create a brand new form. We're going to go ahead and give this form a title. In this case, it's going to be called Time Off Request Form. So let's go ahead and put that in. So time off request form. And here we go. Now, if you wanted to add a picture, you could. In this case, it would be the company logo, but you can absolutely do that. We can simply insert image, and we can search for an image via Bing. We can move to our OneDrive, or we can simply upload a particular image. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to upload an image, and we're going to move quickly through this, and let's grab our logo. All right, so now we have our logo. In the description, we're just going to simply put in what we really want them to do and what they can expect. And so in this particular case, we're telling them that they need to fill out the time off request form and submit for approval. Now, let's add a new item. In this case, it's going to be choice. So our question one is really not a question. It's really what we want them to do. So in this case, it's going to be the time off type. Time off type. And then we're going to fill it in. And so our option one will be vacation. We'll take option two, that will be personal. Get some variety here. Add another option, sick. Let's add jury duty. 5 will be training, because we count that as well. That is paid time off. And then other. All right. And so we're going to make this required. No multiple answers. Just choose one. Now our ellipsis here, or our more, allows us to either shuffle the options. This is depending on what you create. We can create it as a drop down. We could have done that as well. We can add a subtitle, which would allow us just to add more information right underneath time off type, or we could add branching, if then, this, that. So we could add branching here as well. Next, we're going to add a new, and in this case, we're going to add comments. So this won't be a required field. However, it is recommended to help secure your time off that you actually do that. We're going to keep this a short answer, not long, and it's not actually required, but we could make it required if we wanted to. Again, now notice how based on what we choose, our more options change. Now we just have subtitle, restrictions, and then we can still add branching. Let's add another. And so in this case, we definitely need a start date. So we're going to add a date, and here we're going to say start date. And we are fine with this input. This is required. Again, notice we can only now add subtitle and add branching. We're going to add an end date. So how long do you anticipate being off? Again, we're fine with the format. It is required. Again, same settings. Okay, so we have that. So at this particular point, we're actually fine with everything we have. So these are our questions. Notice everything is in line. And then you can continue to create more if you feel like you need to. Okay, so first, let's come over to our more form settings, and we're actually going to step into settings. We're first going to look at who can fill out this form. So in this case, we only want people in our organization to respond. Now, you can create a form where external people can actually do that. But if you want to use the upload feature where they can upload information and things of that nature, that will not apply for those that are external. That is only for internal staff only. So in that case, just be aware of that, but you can set this up for registration, things of that nature. So again, only people in our organization can respond. Yes, we do want it to record the name. We're going to decide in this case to not check one response per person, because that will keep them from asking for time off again. Under option for responses, yes, we want to accept responses. We're not going to do a start and end date. This says that we want the form to expire. Now, based on the form, you may want to cycle them out. So they do have a life cycle, but in this case, we're not going to add one. We don't need to shuffle the questions, but we do want to add a customized thank you message. And so that we're going to do. So we're just going to thank them for submitting. And so we're going to go ahead and put that in. And so thank you for submitting. And then under notification, send an email receipt to the respondents. Absolutely. Just so that we can have, quote unquote, a paper trail. And then email notifications of each response. Yes, I am the one creating this form, so it is signed in and to my tenant or to my profile. So our settings are set at this point. Now, if you have international staff, things of that nature, then you want to step into the multilingual. And so here you can add additional languages. And here are the list of languages. And so you can add those that need to be converted. So make sure if you are dealing with an international staff that if need be, you add those additional languages. Okay, and so we're good here. Now at this particular point, we can go ahead and add a theme. If you really want to, I want to, so let's add one. I particularly like this one, but we can scroll down and even add an additional one. So if you want to customize and put the logo behind, or you have particular organizational colors that you want to add if they're not already here, that can be done as well. All right, so we have our theme. We're good. We're going to close that back down. Let's preview. So everything looks good. Notice it says right here, hi, Tech Gym Educational. When you submit this form, the owner will be able to see your name and email address. So that is automatically put in for us because that is the setting that we requested. Now, this is what it looks like on the computer, but let's view our mobile side. So this is mobile friendly and it looks good. Looks good. Right? So easy to use. It's very, very fluid. All right. So let's go back. Now, one of the other things that you may want to do, and this really could help, and that is you actually want to make sure that you are actually sharing as well. So want to check those. So let's share. Now, when we step into share, we can click our chevron and again, have that choice. Anyone with the link can respond. No, we only want people in our organization to respond. We can go ahead and copy that link if we want to send it out. We can also use it as a QR code. We can embed it if we need to, or we can simply email it. Okay, we can share as a template, but most importantly, let's share to collaborate. And so what we want to do is we want to add an additional person or persons. If I'm out, I want someone else to be able to take the reins in case something happens or a change needs to be made. So it says users with an Office 365 work or school account. That's not applicable to us, nor is it applicable people in our organization. I want to send it to a specific person. And in this case, I'm going to send it to our office manager. Simply start to type in that name and there it is. Okay. And so now they have access. We can click the chevron here and see who has access to that. Now they can view and edit. Okay. And simply copy, and I can go ahead and send this to Brenda. All right. So those pieces are in for us. And so I am going to grab a quick sticky, and I am actually going to put it on a sticky note. And if you have not stepped into stickies, this is kind of a side note, but if you haven't stepped into stickies, you really should. Stickies are the same as notes if you're using OneNote. So they kind of all work together. And so I absolutely love my sticky notes because I don't like writing, and it's really, really quick for me. I can use it on the phone, and it will also show on my system, my computer system. So here we have our questions. our responses will show here. Now, just a quick note. If you open this in Excel, as you get your responses, one thing that I want to make sure that you understand is that as you begin to get your responses, if you open it up in Excel, wherever you open that Excel and you save it, that's where it needs to stay. If you open the Excel spreadsheet and you move it, you will break the link. It will no longer gather the information for you. Okay. Now, because we know this may happen, this is exactly why we are collecting our responses in SharePoint. So that's going to be the reason for the SharePoint list. All right. So we are done in this particular section, and now it is time for us to move on to the next piece of this. Okay. So with that being said, we're going to simply open up our SharePoint. All right, so inside of our SharePoint, remember we talked about our HR team site. We're going to go back here, okay? And we're going to quickly create a list. Now, we're going to mimic our form in SharePoint. Now, we have asked for, but it has not appeared yet. Why can't we just have a simple command to say connect to SharePoint list? That has not happened yet. But at any rate, we're going to put this in. So there is some minimal work that needs to be done. So we're going to create a custom SharePoint list, and we're going to name it time off request. So we're just going to click list, give it a name, and again, we're going to call it time off request. So let's go ahead and put that in. Okay. So we have a time off request here. And we could add a description if we wanted to. It could be the same actually that we have on the form. But in this case, we don't really need it. We all know why the list is here, and it's really just to collect. But if you wanted to put that, you can. It's your choice if you wanted to show in the site navigation. And so we're going to go ahead and do that. We're going to say we want to keep that. So let's create this list. All right, so we're going to add our very first column. And remember, I told you we're going to mimic what we have on our form. So the very first column is going to be time off type. And so we're going to create that. Now, even though we created multiple choices that they can choose from, in this case, we just want a single line of text. If you put in choice again, it's not going to read. It's going to actually require you to put it in. It's not going to read. So be careful with items such as that. So we're going to paste here. Again, we're going to leave it as a single line text. We're going to open up our more options. And yes, this is a required field. We're not going to enforce a unique value at this point, and add to all column types. Absolutely. And save. Okay. Our next one, remember we had, was comments. So we're going to put these comments in. And again, we're going to add another column. And again, I am going to leave this as a single line of text. Not too much, just a brief description if they decide to put something in. So we're going to add comments. Again, single line of text. If you put in multi-line, that's fine as well. But I'm going to leave mine as single line of text. This is not a required field, so I'm not going to require it on this side as well. Okay, next will be our start date. So this will be a date and time. And so let's put in start date. Okay, so we have that. And include time. No, it can be in a friendly format. Yes, it is required. Okay. And we're going to go ahead and save. And there it is. And next, we're going to put in, you guessed it, end date. So let's go ahead and put that in. So we're going to say end date, no time. Yes, it is required. We're not going to enforce unique values. Okay. And so here we are. Now, at this particular point, we've kind of gone through, we've created everything. Now, I could have subsequently stepped into my settings here in the upper right-hand corner, and I could have easily gone to list settings as well. So whatever's comfortable for you, absolutely do. But we just decided to kind of create it very quickly right here. But if you stepped into list settings, And for many of you, this will be reminiscent of that 2013 type of vibe, but you can do the same. So we could have come here to create column and added those same parameters. So we could have done that. Same thing, we just did it in quick mode, right? So we did it in quick mode, which I love. That's my favorite. And so now we have our time off request list created, and here it is. Okay, so now from here, the next thing we want to do, we've checked everything, we're good. Let's change this title. So I am going to rename this, and I'm just going to call it employee name. Okay, employee name, I'm going to put that there and hit save. Okay, so the very first thing we did was we created our form. So again, time off type, comments, our start date, our end date. Here we go. Okay, so in preview mode, this is what it looks like. Okay, so we're going to look at that in a moment. We came over to our SharePoint site. We decided to create a new list. Okay, and so in doing that, we simply created our columns. Of course, we can kind of shorten these a little bit. So again, we are mimicking the same information, time off type, comment, start date, end date. Now I could add a yes, no kind of approval piece here, but it's not going to flow very well for what we're about to do, but you could absolutely do that if you wanted to. But again, make sure that it is something that you have on the form. Back and forth, you want them to match as close as possible. Now let's step into a Power Automate. Now I could simply go to a Power Automate here. I could do that, right? And we can create a flow. And so if you don't have this turned on, this may be a talking point for you and your IT team. You may have to ask the IT team to create this particular flow for you. So if that's the case, then this would be a talking point, and this may be where you have to stop. But then just be sure that you let them know what you want. All right. So in that case, let's go back to our Microsoft 365 ecosystem. And here I'm going to go to Power Automate. And so Power Automate is going to load. All right. So we are on our home tab, and here it's just giving us information about our Office 365. I'm going to go to templates, but I could go to create as well. So I could come here and do that as well. I can do an automated flow, an instant flow, a scheduled flow, so on and so forth. But here I am just going to go to templates. Remember, I told you at a click of a button. And so that's what we're going to do. Now, what do we want? Really simple. And it's right here for us. We want to record form responses in SharePoint. Yes. Click that button. And there it is. So Microsoft Forms and SharePoint. We have just created a flow. That flow is here. So now the flows will connect. But there's a little work we have to do. So now we have to hit continue. Once we hit continue, the actual flow will then open. Now remember, I told you this was no code or very low code. So it's here. You just need to walk through the wizard. So think of it as a wizard. So what happens? Well, let's pick the form first. There it is. It's beautiful. Time off request. Okay. Then it asks list of responses. Yes. Now this we have to fill in form ID. So let's click the drop down, and there it is. Beautiful. It's moving right into the flow that we want. The site address. Now, if you already have the site address from SharePoint, you can absolutely grab that and share it. I'm just going to click the drop down, let it find it itself. This really depends. I know it's right here, my HR team site. There it is. List name. So now we're going to find that list name. There it is. Time off request. Simple. So now this information is literally connected. It is connected. Let's fill in a couple of other pieces. So now what do we want to call this? So again, we're just going to keep it simple. It is time off. Now, what happens is we get dynamic content. Basically, we get to fill in the content here. Okay, but we're going to give it a title, and it is time off request. Okay, now in this case, I know that I want to add one more piece. So I said, I know I said that it was going to be super simple, right? So we wanted to collect, but there's a couple of other pieces that I want to add. I also want to add approval. So I want a complete automation. I want everyone to fill out the form. I want the information collected in SharePoint for our HR team, but then I want it to move to a manager for their approval. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. So in this case, we're just going to call it time off request. So let's go ahead and type that in. And so because I want approval, I am actually going to call this time off approval. Okay, time off approval. And then time off type. If we want to add that, we can simply add it there. Start date. Do we need that start date? Yes. So notice we do not see that information. Click see more. Click see more, and it will give you exactly what you're looking for, right? So there we go. We got our start date. End date. It's going to do the same thing. We don't want the time it was submitted necessarily. It's going to come through for us in SharePoint, so we're not necessarily worried about that. We're going to add our end date. Comments. So notice what we're doing. We're only just matching up the fields, right? Kind of like what you do in Word. Very simple. All right. So we can show those advanced options. And really, honestly, at this point, this is created. It's created. Now, what's going to happen when we fill out the form? Not only will we get the responses in forms, that's fine. We can look at that as well. And maybe quarterly or biannually, maybe we want to export to Excel, maybe to run some other reports, but maybe we'll run those in Power BI. That really just depends. And that's definitely another class session. But let's look at this. I do want to add an approval. Okay, so let's do that. So that's called adding an action. Okay, adding an action. So let's add that action. So in this case, don't get confused. Don't say, what just happened? We're simply going to put in approval. We're going to have it look for it for us. And their approvals are right there. We're going to click on it, take some of that noise out the way. We got it. So now we can create an approval. Information is always here to the side. So if you click on it, it tells you it starts an automated approval process. Okay, so if that's what you want, but you can start and wait for an approval. That can work as well. Or you can just simply wait for an approval. So based on really what you want, choose the one that works best for you, or let IT know what works best for you. All right, so we're just going to create an approval. All right, so now in this case, what is the approval type? Do we want to approve or reject? Kind of sounds harsh, but we're going to keep this simple. We could do custom responses, and you can ask your IT team, or if you can step in, you can do that as well. But we're just going to keep this simple. So everyone must approve or first to respond. So this is really based on how you're set up in your company. So we're just going to say first to respond. Okay, so now let's create a title. And so again, I am just going to kind of repeat this title. Now, again, we can open up to this dynamic information and put in what we want. Okay, so what's the title for approval? So in this case, it's going to be the same, time off approval, or we can say time off approval or time off manager approval. So maybe that sounds a little better. So let's do that, manager approval. And then who is it assigned to? Notice if you assign it to more than one person, that's why you would have either first come, first serve to approve, or several people must approve it. So if it needs to go through several steps, that's why you would pick the different type of approval process. In this case, there's just one approval person, and so that's me, and so we're going to put it in. However, we're going to, or could also add our office manager. So remember, we don't want anything to stop just because one person is out. We could add details. We don't need that. We could add a link to the item to approve, but the item to approve is going to come through anyway. But for us, let's pull this down some so we can see. For us, notice there are already pieces built in for you. And so you can actually add these particular pieces. Okay, so the item can be linked really to whatever you want. So if you want it linked to the form, you would put the form in. But notice it's not mandatory. Okay, it's not mandatory, but you could link to the form. Okay. However, it's me, so I don't really have a reason to add an item link. Now, if you're creating this on behalf of someone else and they need that information, or the manager needs that information, you absolutely want to put that in if you know your manager is not going to step into Forms or SharePoint. So in that case, yes, you do want to add the form here so they can view it. Okay, and give them permission to get in. And then the description, you can add that as well. All right, so at this particular point, we've added really, honestly, all of our pieces. We're going to save. Everything looks good. It's saved. In the upper right-hand corner is a flow checker. You want to step in to see if you have any errors. This will help you kind of gauge what's been, what you have wrong, and then you can step into it and instantly, honestly, just repair that right then and there. This is if you're able to step in. Okay, you can also test it. Again, this is saved and we are actually ready to go. So it's going to record form responses in SharePoint. Okay, that's the description and it shows the owner. The connections. So we have forms in SharePoint and then also approvals. This has been turned on. Okay, so it has a 28-day run history that we can look at. All of our runs, we can come back just to make sure we are in compliance. Okay, so now at this point, this is sitting in my flows. This is sitting in my flow. So here is the flow here. And at any time that we need to step in and edit, we can, again, if this is something you're creating, and those steps are here. You can always add those steps or take out any of the steps that you need to. All right, so now we've put all our pieces together, and it didn't take us really just that long to do that. All right, so at this particular point, what are we going to do? Well, let's grab this link. Sorry about that. There we go. Let's grab this link. So this has been copied, and let's open up in a new window. And here we go. We're going to fill this out. We're going to fill this out. So I'm going to say that I am going to do training, and my comments are this. So I want training to go to the Microsoft Ignite conference. So we're going to go to Microsoft Ignite. Okay. And so that's the reason for the training. That start date is September 21st, and I believe to the 24th. And yes, send me an email receipt of my responses and let's submit. And there we go. So thank you for submitting your time off request. Your request is waiting for manager approval status. So there we go. That has been put in. What we should get shortly is an email. Okay. So we're going to look at this from a couple of spaces. Let's step into SharePoint first. So we're going to step back into SharePoint and we're going to go to our HR team site. And here is our time off request here on the left-hand side. And let's see what we have produced. And there it is. Time off approval. Type training. Remember, I told you that even though we had the choice, what we want to do is we want to keep this at just a single line of text. Here are my comments, start date and end date. Now, why are these different? Well, one I picked friendly date and the other I just told it to take the regular date. So this is the difference, and I did that so you can see the difference between the two if you weren't sure how that actually worked. All right, and so we can again step into this. If we click on that time off approval, here it is. Okay, and there it is. All right, and so at this particular point we can go back if we decide, well, we want to tweak And so maybe this is not giving us what we actually want. Well, let me show you what you need to do. So at this particular point, let's step back into Power Automate. And this is kind of why you want to test it first. So we're going to come back to My Flows. Okay. And come here. Okay. So it shows us that it succeeded. So yay, it succeeded. So let's look at this and let's step into our flow. So we have our time off. Okay, so that's correct. And apply to each. Okay, so we can create our items. So these look good to us. We're fine. Get response details. Okay, so again, see how easily we can step into it. Okay. So really simple. If you wanted to go back and change anything, you absolutely could. Okay, so list columns by view. We could do all. Okay, so there we go. Okay, so really, really simple, really easy to step back in. So I wanted to show you how easily you could step back in if you wanted to change any of the pieces, and you can. Okay, so not only did I get an email, but also Brenda got an email, and that worked fine. So what does that look like for us on that email side? Really, really simple. So again, time off request. Okay, and so here we go. So now let's open up our email and really kind of see what that looks like for us. So let's pull that over. Give me one moment. I'm going to pull this over so we can see this in a highlight. And here we go. So the very first thing was, because I filled it out, right? So it shows me, let's open up and download this. We trust this. I can view my responses. So this is what it looks like for the end user. They can view their responses. So they can step into it, view their response. And let's bring that back over so you can see it. Have multiple screens. So let's sign in. And so we can see our response. So training, there we go. The conference. Notice how I cannot touch it. It is done. So I can view my responses. Okay, so that's one. And now here is the submission. So now we know that we have a time off request form that has been submitted. So I did ask for that email. If this is not necessary for you when you create that form, just tell it that you don't need that if you feel like you're going to go to SharePoint or check on this quite often. What I do recommend, though, is that you set up at this particular point, once you test it, you may want to set up a rule and create a folder and have it move into that folder. Or you can create another flow to have this moved somewhere else. Okay, so again, I would set up definitely a rule so that this doesn't clutter your email, but your email box, but you definitely want to look at that and then you can move it later. Now, what does it look like for the time off manager approval? Well, this is what it looks like. Okay, so let's download those pictures. And so it shows who did the requesting, when it was requested, and then I can approve or reject. Now, if I reject, I can put a reason. If I approve, I can put a reason. Okay. So the rejection may be, well, you don't have enough PTO time, or it's just not a good time to take any time off. Okay. So whatever that looks like for the manager, let them know they can fill that in. Now, from a mobile use, they can absolutely have flows on their phone, and they can approve or reject it right then as well. Put in the comment. So this is also mobile friendly, so they can control their flows there as well for the approval, as well as the forms. So they can look at both from a mobile or tablet view. So just wanted to show you that I can, let's go ahead and approve it. So we will approve. Okay, so you are clear for the days requested. And let's go ahead and submit that. So now that's done. So now the approval process is done. I will get that information. It's done. HR will convey that to me. So whatever that process is for you, what I wanted to show you is that this is absolutely an automation and that we can do. So I hope that you have gained some knowledge on creating forms, creating a Power Flow or Power Automate. I like to just call it Flow. And then setting up your SharePoint list inside of your site to look at that. Now we can move to Teams. We can move to Teams, and we are going to, let me pull this over since my app popped up. And so again, what can we do? We can literally come here and we can add a tab, right? So now we can add our form. So if we really wanted this to sit inside of the form, sit inside of the team or put it somewhere else, we can absolutely do that. We can do our SharePoint list. So we can do SharePoint lists. We can add SharePoint. Those lists can sit inside of the channels now. So we can easily move through this and make that happen. Here we go. And so we can either do pages or list. So we can choose our time off request, hit save. And then there it is. So this is brand new as of September 4th. We can now add lists. So everyone inside of the team, we can be here, we can talk about it, but again, we can open up in SharePoint. We can view it there as well. So this is basically about workflow. So I hope that you have enjoyed today's session. Let's go back. And so again, we talked about forms. We talked about Power Automate. I will always call it flows. And we talked about SharePoint. Thank you for joining this episode of Admin Chat.